Hi, I'm Bill from CJ Pony Parts. We mentioned before, if you're looking to lower your 2015 Mustang properly, there's a couple other parts you're going to want to consider. Recently, we showed you Ford Racing's Jounce bumper kit, which is a must-have for a lower car. Another piece you definitely want to consider is these caster camber plates from Maximum Motorsports. When you lower your Mustang, if you lower it too far, eventually the wheels will start to tilt inward, and it's going to cause uneven wear on your tires. The caster camber plates from Maximum Motorsports allow up to 1.75 degrees of camber adjustment, which allow you to get your alignment in spec and have the car go straight and not wear your tires. Today we're going to show you how to install these using our 2015 Mustang GT. These Maximum Motorsports camber plates are made in the USA of a high-grade alloy steel and will fit all 2015 Mustangs. As an added benefit of the adjustment of caster and camber, the high-grade alloy steel actually is a much better mounting point for your strut and will cause a lot less movement. These are sold as a pair and will work with any lowering springs or aftermarket struts. For this installation, let a lift and a pull jack or a jack and jack stands, half-inch ratchet, 13mm socket, 15mm socket, 18mm socket, 3/4 socket, 13/16 socket, 15/16 deep socket, 21mm socket, short extension, 15mm wrench, 17mm wrench, half-inch impact gun, panel removal tool, hammer, and a spring compressor. Installing the Maximum Motorsports Caster Camber Plates is going to require us to remove the front struts. The first step in the installation, get the car off the ground, remove the front wheels. With the wheel off, we're going to begin the installation by disconnecting the sway bar from the strut. To do that, you want to put a wrench on the back side to hold the sway bar and then remove the nut. The sway bar out of the way, we're going to move on to disconnecting the caliper. To get that off the bracket, there's two 15mm bolts. There's one right here and one down here. Remove them, remove the caliper from the bracket, and set it aside. We're going to remove the two ABS lines as well, one from the strut mount here, and then one from the side of the strut down here. To separate the spindle from the strut, these nuts and bolts have to be removed. We're going to start by taking the nuts off. You don't want to take them all the way off, just to the edge. I'll explain why in a minute. Thread it on just to the edge of the bolt. The reason for leaving the nut is you have to actually hammer these bolts out since they're pressed on. If you didn't have the nut there, you could mushroom the end of the bolt and not get the nut back on. And leaving the nut gives you a better surface to hit and also doesn't damage the threads. And usually at this point, you can get them through by hand. Separate the strut from the spindle. Now we're going to move up to the engine bay. The strut is held to the strut tower by these three nuts. What you want to do is remove the first two. When you go to remove the last one, make sure you're holding on to the strut or it'll fall off. Now we have the strut assembly on the table, we have to remove the spring. To do that, you want to compress the spring first before removing the nut on the top of the strut. Now we can remove the strut nut. The Maximum Motorsports Caster Camber Plate is going to replace the top of the strut mount. So you want to separate these two pieces, put that aside. You want to keep the rubber insulator. You want to make sure this edge is parallel with that line there. The stud plates are actually universal, but this plate is specific. You make sure it sits with the studs that these two lines are parallel. We'll just rest it till it seats on there and moves cleanly. Now we can reassemble the strut. Make sure the spring is seated properly and decompress the spring. When reinstalling the spring assembly into the car, you want to make sure that this ear here is facing outward. They go out towards the fender, this flat bar here faces towards the front. We put this up into place. Use one of the supplied bolts and washers to hold it in. And we're holding the strut up through there. Install the supplied top plate. Again, hand tighten the nuts and washers. Now we're going to reconnect the strut to the spindle. When we tighten these nuts, it'll actually pull the bolts through. Just give them a little tap to get them started. Those bolts tight, now we can reinstall the rotor and caliper. We'll thread one lug nut on just to hold the rotor in place. Makes it a lot easier to line up the caliper. I'm going to reconnect the ABS line next. We'll reinstall the sway bar end link. Now up here in the tower, we're going to tighten down these 3 bolts, then torque them to 46 foot-pound. Now you want to repeat the process on the other side and your installation is finished. Maximum Motorsports parts are always top-notch, and our 2015 Caster Camber plates are no different. The 1.75 degrees of adjustment allow us to really nail the alignment on our lower 2015 Mustang GT. Installation is pretty straightforward, especially if you're already installing springs. There's not no additional time at all. You already have the springs in the car. Figure about an hour and a half for installation. We'll be back on the road in no time.